Parker Schnabel dropped $1 million this week in the Yukon. His 4 wash plants returned $1.5 million worth of gold. On the surface, that sounds like a solid win, until you consider where he started this season and where those figures were supposed to land. This is week 14. The deficit is widening, not closing. 2 consecutive weeks of falling output. A second pit that still hasn't been built. A wash plant operator let go for failing to catch a machine jam as it happened. We had Rick operating Slucifer, and he didn't catch a backup in the stacker. Luckily Sean was nearby and stepped in immediately. And Rick, he's done. He doesn't work here anymore. Laughter. While time kept passing and costs kept stacking up, the operation began working against itself. Not through some dramatic breakdown, but through the slow, expensive kind of deterioration that's actually harder to correct. And right now, Parker faces a decision that no amount of machinery can make for him. The empire that burns through money. Parker isn't simply managing 4 plants. He's managing 4 plants while actively trying to grow. That expansion carries a price tag of $100,000 a day. Not per week, per day. With no days off, no slowdowns, and no breathing room while new ground gets broken open. That's the single largest fixed cost most viewers never stop to consider. Every time Parker relocates a wash plant to a new cut, the machine goes quiet for days while the crew strips away the overburden and moves the equipment into position. Those are days with 0 gold production that still burn through $100,000 each. The operation doesn't hit pause while the crew does that work. It hemorrhages money. Earlier in the season, Parker described his management approach this way. I've been a lot more hands-off this year. We've got 4 wash plants running, which is incredible, but we still have a long way to go. At the time, that statement sounded like confidence. The kind of thing a leader says when the operation has grown large enough to need trusted lieutenants rather than constant supervision. For sites running under experienced crew leads, with Parker checking in rather than hovering. It had the shape of a scaling business, not a one-man operation. This week, that same statement sounds entirely different. Because a hands-off approach only holds up when every single person running those plants is fully locked in every single moment. When one operator stops paying close enough attention to his machine, the entire philosophy falls apart. The costs don't decrease. The daily meter doesn't stop. The gold just stops coming up. And the space between what's being spent and what's being recovered gets larger. Parker isn't simply running 4 plants while expanding. Every additional machine is another potential point of failure. Every additional crew member introduces another human judgment call that might go wrong. Every additional stretch of new ground is another geological variable that may not perform the way the surveys indicated. This week, all 3 of those risks appeared simultaneously. There is a version of this season where the hands-off structure performs exactly as intended, where every crew lead is fully dialed in, every machine is running at capacity, and Parker moves freely between sites making high-level calls instead of chasing problems. That version of the season existed in the early weeks. The daily costs were identical. The returns were stronger. Priority right now is just keeping those wash plants running no matter what. So we always need more people. We've been getting crew coming over from Tony's, which has been a real help. During that stretch, the gap between spending and production was manageable, even comfortable. The version Parker is living right now is different. The machines are still running. The daily cost is still $100,000. But production is slipping downward, and the window to turn it around is shrinking every single day. $100,000 every day, whether the gold surfaces or not. The stall. At the start of this season, Parker's 4 plants were collectively pulling over 500 ounces a week. Some weeks exceeded that. The operation felt like it was gaining momentum, like the early figures were a baseline, not a ceiling, and the strongest production was still to come. This week, 433.4 ounces. 14 weeks into the season, and output has fallen by nearly 70 ounces per week compared to where it was running early on. At current gold prices, that represents a $245,000 per week drop in production. Meanwhile, the daily operating cost hasn't shifted by a single dollar. The expense of running this operation is locked in. The revenue coming out of the ground is not. And those 2 numbers are moving in opposite directions. Parker needs 550 ounces a week or more to stay on pace with his seasonal goals. He hasn't reached that number in 2 weeks. Both weeks have landed further below it, not closer. The trend isn't leveling out. It's drifting. And in a window measured in weeks rather than months, a drift is nearly as dangerous as a freefall. That is what going in reverse actually looks like. Not an explosion. Not a catastrophic flood. A slow, compounding gap between what the operation costs and what it delivers, growing wider at exactly the moment when there are fewer and fewer weeks remaining to close it. And the thing about a drift is that it doesn't feel like a crisis until, suddenly, it does. Each individual week still looks survivable. 433 ounces is still over $1 million in gold. Big Bob is still producing. The golden mile is still turning. But line up 3 or 4 weeks of that drift side by side. Run the figures against the daily burn rate and the season goal. The picture changes. The operation isn't losing money, but it's losing ground. And in the Yukon, with the calendar running out, losing ground is its own kind of emergency. Roxanne and the end of Cut 1. Roxanne has been working at Keenan Stewart's claim since early in the season, quietly and reliably processing pay dirt through Pit 1, while the louder production battles played out at the Golden Mile and Dominion. No blow-ups, no equipment drama. Just a consistent, dependable wash plant doing its job week after week. This week, Roxanne ran out of ground. The final haul from Pit 1 came in at 76.3 ounces, worth just over $260,000. It's the old cut. Alright, let's see what Roxanne did here. 76.3, that's the last of Cut 1. That's the end of it. That's not a disappointing number for the tail end of a cut. But the moment that gold hit the scale, Pit 1 was finished. The ground that has been feeding this corner of Parker's operation all summer has been mined out completely. And Parker's reaction wasn't to take a moment to reflect. He's already pushing for a second pit at Keenan Stewart's, twice the size of Pit 1, and he wants it producing before the season wraps up. Not just opened. Producing. That's the benchmark. Stripping and opening a pit of that scale takes time that is now genuinely scarce. The excavators need to clear the overburden, the barren cap material sitting above the pay gravel. That work doesn't happen overnight. In ground like this, a pit twice the size of what Roxanne just finished could require 3 to 4 weeks of full excavator work before the wash plant can process a single yard. The season doesn't have unlimited weeks remaining. Parker is asking his crew to move fast enough that the calendar doesn't overtake them. What makes this harder is that there's no overlap period. The old cut is exhausted. The new cut has to come online immediately, not after a planning meeting, not after the crew takes a breath following the season's first half. Mitch and the team at Keenan Stewart's know exactly what's expected. The machines are already in motion. Parker is already pushing toward the next cut. There is no pause. There is no room to breathe. The moment Pit 1 went dry, the pressure transferred. Big Bob and the bridge cut. You're in 3 digits. Can't argue with that. That was Parker at the weigh-in after Big Bob's numbers came back from Dominion Creek. A measured acknowledgement. Qualified approval. 3 digits, Parker is grading on a curve, and that curve exists because Big Bob has been one of the most dependable machines in the entire operation all season. Bob has been averaging close to 160 ounces per week in the bridge cut. A stretch of creek that required substantial geological work just to gain access before the first yard of pay dirt could even be washed. This week, Bob weighed in at 120.7 ounces, worth over $420,000. That's a 40-ounce shortfall against the weekly average. At current gold prices, that translates to roughly $140,000 in production that simply didn't materialize. If Bob continues running that far below his average over the remaining weeks of the season, the compounding shortfall becomes serious very quickly. The important context: Bob still has half of the bridge cut left to work through. That ground is there. The gold should be there. The cut has been consistent all season, and there's no reason to believe the back half will run thin. Parker's team identified the bridge cut as deep, high-grade ground before the season ever began. The original expectation was that the second half would match the first, possibly even outperform it. Nothing that has come out of Dominion this season has given anyone cause to question that. But should be doesn't settle the daily bill. And 120 ounces instead of 160 is a pattern that compounds quickly when the season is already running behind pace. The machine needs to return to its average and hold it cleanly through the closing weeks. No slowdowns, no equipment surprises, no trouble in the ground. The math has to work at Dominion. Tyson and the crew have the ground. They have the machine. They need the numbers to follow. Bob cannot afford another off week. The Golden Mile, where the numbers were supposed to climb. Slucifer and Big Red are running at the same time on the same stretch of ground. A section Parker's team identified as carrying the highest gold concentrations in the entire operation. The Golden Mile. 2 wash plants on 1 cut. Both running at full capacity. Both pulling from ground that was supposed to grow richer as the season pushed deeper into the deposit. The strategy made sense on paper. Commit 2 machines to the best ground, drive hard into it, and let the rising gold concentrations justify the investment. Early in the season, the Golden Mile was delivering exactly what Parker anticipated. This week, Slucifer and Big Red combined for 236.4 ounces, worth over $820,000. Last week, they put up 247 ounces. The week before that, production was higher still. The line is moving the wrong way, gradually a few ounces at a time but consistently, and at the worst possible point in the season. Things have definitely slowed down since the beginning of the season. We started really strong and we've been sliding. We need to somehow turn that around and get back on schedule. He's telling you to find better ground. I'm trying to say it nicely. Laughter. It's too late for that. Parker needs the Golden Mile to get richer as the season draws to a close. This week it went the other direction. 2 wash plants, the best ground in the operation, $820,000 in a single week, and it still isn't enough to bridge the gap between what the season was designed to be and what it's becoming. The honest question nobody on the Golden Mile crew wants to confront yet. Is the richest ground still waiting for them, buried deeper in the cut? Or have they already washed through the best of it? Parker put 2 machines on the table betting the first answer was true. Right now, the weekly numbers are pointing toward the second. That question doesn't get answered at a weigh-in. It gets answered by the ground. And the ground isn't giving a definitive answer yet, which, in $1 million a week operation this close to the finish line, might be the most unsettling answer of all. Slucifer goes down. Slucifer's superstacker was already a machine living on borrowed time before this week. It was purchased secondhand earlier in the season, a cost-cutting decision that made sense given the scale of Parker's expansion. Made it here in one piece. Looks good. This wash plant has a lot more slew run width, so that should boost our yardage and help us get through all the pay here at Dominion in the money pit. It's a bit of a gamble going with something untested this late in the season, but we'll roll those dice. And it arrived carrying 20,000 hours already on the clock. 20,000 hours on a piece of heavy equipment means the electrical system is unpredictable. It means problems appear without warning in the control box, in the wiring, in components that were already worn when the machine was bought. It means you watch the stacker constantly because a backup builds gradually on a tired machine. And by the time the generator surges, you're already behind. That's exactly what happened this week at Slucifer. Material backed up. The generator surged trying to compensate. Smoke poured out of the electrical housing. From a distance, Sean looked up at just the right moment, read the situation instantly, and sounded the alarm. The crew came in with shovels and cleared the jam by hand. Physically demanding work performed under pressure while the clock kept running and the $100,000 a day meter kept ticking in the background. After roughly an hour of emergency clearing and a mechanical inspection, Slucifer came back online. But here's what the smoke was actually signaling. The machine had been running jammed for a considerable amount of time before anyone noticed. Not seconds. Long enough for the backup to build to the point where it triggered the generator surge. Long enough for the damage to the system to be real, even if it turned out to be recoverable this time. Rick was the operator assigned to Slucifer. Rick wasn't watching closely enough. Parker acted immediately. Rick was gone. No drawn-out conversation. No second chance. Parker assessed what happened, identified the failure, not mechanical but human, and removed it from the operation that same day. That's the reality of running a $1 million a week operation on a hands-off management model. The structure only functions if every operator runs their machine as if Parker is standing right beside them. Rick wasn't doing that. A machine with 20,000 hours needs more vigilance, not less. It needed someone who understood that from the start. Someone who monitored the stacker the way a caregiver monitors a patient, checking constantly, watching for the early warning signs, catching the problem at the shovel stage before it ever becomes a generator stage. Sean was doing exactly that from across the site. Rick, standing right next to the machine, wasn't. It's fortunate Sean spotted it when he did. If the jam had gone undetected for another hour, the damage to the superstacker could have shut Slucifer down for days, not an hour. This isn't the small operation Tony's got going over there. This is where the big boys play. The weigh-in. When Parker sat down for the weekly gold weigh, the atmosphere was steady and somber, not panicked. This is a crew that has ground through difficult stretches before. But there was the particular kind of quiet that settles over a room when everyone already knows the number isn't going to be what it needs to be. Roxanne, 76.3 ounces. Big Bob, 120.7 ounces. Slucifer and Big Red together, 236.4 ounces. Combined total, 433.4 ounces. Season running total, 6,742.3 ounces. Last week we had 453 ounces on the nose. This week it's 433.4. Season total, 6,742.3. 2 straight weeks of decline. 2 straight weeks below the 550-ounce weekly target Parker established at the start of the season. And the gap between where the operation is performing and where it needs to be is $245,000 a week, and still widening. 6,742.3 ounces across 14 weeks is a figure that most mining operations in the world will never come close to. Parker Schnabel has banked over $22 million in gold this summer. Removed from context, the season looks dominant. Placed back into context, the daily burn rate, the expansion costs, the seasonal target he set for himself, the picture is considerably tighter than the headline number implies. Parker set his weekly target at 550 ounces or better. He hasn't reached it in 2 weeks. At 433.4 ounces, he's running 117 ounces short of target. At current prices, that's a $48,000 per week shortfall against his own projections. The gold he's pulling from the ground is real. The gap between that gold and what he planned for is equally real. Both truths exist at once. And right now, it's the gap that's driving every decision being made on the creek. Things have definitely slowed down since the beginning of the season. We started really strong and we've been sliding. We need to somehow turn that around and get back on schedule. He wasn't sugarcoating it. The pace that made this season feel like something exceptional needs to return. And it needs to return now. The clock is running. The Yukon doesn't negotiate. Freeze up arrives when it arrives, and when it does, the season ends whether Parker has hit his target or not. Every week of declining production is a week permanently subtracted from the ledger. The calendar doesn't know or care that Parker has 4 plants in the field and $1 million a week in operating costs. It doesn't care that the operation started strong or that the season total looks impressive on paper. It just runs. Parker knows the schedule better than anyone. He's watched seasons end prematurely. He's watched ground that looked promising in August become impossible to work by October. The Yukon gives you a window. What you accomplish inside that window is the entire game. Roxanne needs the new pit open and processing pay dirt before the season closes. Bob needs to return to his weekly average and hold it throughout the back half of the bridge cut. Slucifer and Big Red need to stop sliding and start locating the richer concentrations the Golden Mile is supposed to deliver. The ground Parker committed 2 machines to on the belief that it would reward the investment. Every day the meter is running. $100,000 spent before midnight, whether the gold surfaces or not. What happens next? Here is where Parker's season actually stands. He needs to average close to 500 ounces a week for the rest of the season just to close the gap with his targets. He just posted 433.4. The shortfall is roughly $235,000 per week. And the trajectory is moving away from the target, not toward it. $235,000 a week in missing production. Compounding in the wrong direction. In a window measured in weeks. The Golden Mile has to deliver on the promise Parker saw in it when he committed 2 machines to that ground. The new pit at Keenan Stewart's has to come online before freeze up. Bob has to return to his average and maintain it through everything the bridge cut still has to offer. And somewhere in all of it, the 2-week slide that has thrown the entire operation off pace has to reverse. The gold is still in the ground. Parker Schnabel has the machines, the crew, and the ground to close this season on his own terms. The question is whether the Yukon gives him enough time, and whether the operation can pull itself back to where it was before the drift became the defining story of the season. Parker built this operation to function at a scale most miners won't even attempt. The cost of that scale is visible every single day. So is the pressure. So is the gap. For plants burning through $1 million a week. And right now, the gold isn't closing it fast enough. Somewhere beyond the tree line, for wash plants are still turning around the clock in the darkness. The meter is still running. The season is still going. If you want to see how this one ends, subscribe and hit the bell now. The next few weeks will answer the question this entire season has been building toward.